Meteorologist Nicole Hartford. Right now, Hurricane Ian is still sitting in the Caribbean. This has been upgraded to a Category 1 hurricane at this point, with winds consistent up to about 85 miles per hour, but we are seeing wind gusts up to about 100 miles per hour. This is still moving slowly through the Caribbean, out of the north-northwest at about 13 miles per hour. At this point, it's sitting south of Cuba and then just west of the Cayman Islands. Hurricane Ian has been strengthening pretty rapidly over the last 24 hours. It upgraded from a tropical storm to now a Category 1 hurricane, and it is forecast to continue that strengthening pattern as we move through the next couple of days. At this point, we're at that Category 1 hurricane status, but it's likely to become a Category 2 hurricane by the end of the day today, with winds sustained up to about 105 miles per hour. It'll be teetering right along that Category 2, Category 3 line as it closes in on Cuba. That's where we will likely see a landfall late tonight and into early tomorrow morning. Then Hurricane Ian enters into the open water of the Gulf of Mexico. The Gulf of Mexico right now is extremely warm water. We're talking sea surface temperatures in the mid to even upper 80s in some locations, which will lead to some even further intensifying as it gets closer to Florida. This is forecast currently to become a major Category 4 hurricane as it gets closer towards the coast, likely passing just west of the Florida Keys as a Category 4 hurricane with winds up to 140 miles per hour. The one kind of glimmer of good news in the forecast for this is that we're seeing some higher wind shear as it gets closer towards the coast. We had that cold front that came through yesterday that brought in some somewhat more stable air. There's higher wind shear. Those two things should help to slightly weaken Hurricane Ian before it makes that landfall along the Florida coast. But it is likely still to be hurricane status, potentially a Category 2 hurricane as it makes that landfall. As far as a timeline of that, it will be getting closer to the Florida coast by about Wednesday, with a potential landfall on Thursday. I'm sure you've noticed that that cone of uncertainty right here as we get towards the end of our forecast track is pretty large. That's because our forecast for this is still a little open-ended. It's looking more likely that we will see that landfall close to the Tampa area, but there's a pretty large swath where we could potentially see landfall that ranges from the Pensacola area off into the panhandle of Florida all the way down south towards the Naples or even the Fort Myers area. So this will still need some fine tuning as to where exactly landfall will be taking place. No matter where it does, though, major impacts are expected along Florida, both with storm surge as well as with rainfall totals, potentially a severe weather threat also associated with that. After it makes landfall, this is going to move northward. It will decrease to eventually a tropical storm and then a tropical depression as it gets closer to Georgia. We could see some impacts here in the Atlanta area associated with Hurricane Ian, but it won't be until the end of this week. We're talking Friday, potentially into Saturday. Here's what our spaghetti models look like right now for that potential landfall. I told you there was a large spread, and there truly is. We are seeing a little bit more of a congregation as far as where these spaghetti models go, especially with the likelihood of this coming up into the Atlanta area. As far as watches and warnings ahead of this, we've got a number of them in effect for the Cayman Islands as well as Cuba, and some that have also been issued yesterday and today along the Florida coast. In red, we have the hurricane warnings for far western Cuba as well as Grand Cayman. Then we have tropical storm warnings, which are the blue across Cuba as well as for portions of the Florida Keys. And then we have hurricane watches as well as tropical storm watches that have been issued from the Florida coast, essentially the west coast, the southernmost point, all the way up through the Tampa area is where we have those hurricane watches and hurricane warnings for the Florida coast. It is likely we will see some additional issued watches and warnings as Hurricane Ian gets closer, especially up along the Florida coast into the coming days. Now, I mentioned that there's still a pretty large area where we could see that landfall, but two of our main forecast models that we look at, the American model as well as the European model, are actually showing more agreement as to where exactly this will go. We have the American model, that's all the green lines you see, and then the European, which is the purpley pink lines, and those are both really just forming right along the Tampa area as far as that potential landfall is concerned, and then moving up towards the north with those impacts through Atlanta. So this is something we're going to want to be watching here as we get towards the end of the week. At this point, I think our rainfall potential is still going to be vastly decided by where exactly Hurricane Ian goes. Even a sway of 50 to 100 miles in the center of circulation of Ian is going to have big differences when it comes to our rainfall totals, as well as our threat for maybe some flooding or even a severe weather threat. At this point, I think our rain chances Friday and Saturday are about 40 to 50%, but these will likely either go up or down as we get closer. This is one of our forecast models showing that rainfall coming in with that potential landfall as we move towards Friday morning, Thursday night, and then pushing in the rain to the Atlanta area. At this point, most of our models are showing some rain by Friday, but certainly the heaviest of the rain, the most widespread of the rain, Friday afternoon and evening through the overnight, as well as into Saturday morning. That rain could stick around even through the afternoon on Saturday, especially into far north Georgia, and then portions of Sunday as well. As far as rainfall totals are concerned from this, our models have truly been all over the place over the last couple of days, but we're starting to see a better consensus with rainfall totals that range from about 2 to 4 inches across much of North Georgia. The lower end of that, some spots that may pick up only 1.5 to 2 inches, but a lot of us will likely see anywhere from 3 to 4 inches. And as you can tell, our forecast models are in pretty good agreement there. The difference, though, between 2 inches and 4 inches could also be the difference between some beneficial rainfall here and then some minor flooding by the end of the week, as well as into the weekend. So we are going to be watching for those rainfall totals closely. Of course, another impact that comes with these tropical systems is our wind potential. So this is our chance of 30+ mile per hour winds as we move towards the end of the week, as that tropical depression, which will eventually be Tropical Depression Ian, moves into Georgia. So there is a likelihood that we could get some gusty winds into Friday and Saturday as well. Now, I mentioned that the chance of us seeing the heavier rainfall, the stronger winds, really matters when it comes to the exact track of Ian. Typically, the strongest side of any tropical cyclone is the eastern quadrant, specifically the northeastern quadrant. So if a tropical cyclone, if Hurricane Ian is moving up towards the north, as it is, the strongest quadrant is going to be that front right side. That's where we typically see the greatest impacts, with both the heaviest rainfall, the strongest storms, as well as the strongest winds and a severe weather threat associated with it. That means that if the center of circulation of Hurricane Ian slides a little bit further towards the east, we'll see much lower impacts here. Whereas if Hurricane Ian stays a little bit further towards the west, we'll likely see some greater impacts into the end of the week and the weekend. Typically the western side, that front left, there's still significant storm surge, and then down towards the southeastern side, the back right, we still have those significant winds. Of course, every quadrant that a hurricane comes through is going to be a dangerous one, but typically that back left side is the weakest, but still remains dangerous. So this will have big impacts in our forecast and exactly what we see into the coming days, especially the end of the week, as we bring in that potential for some very gusty winds as well as some heavy rainfall. We had a slow hurricane season, at least a slow start to the hurricane season, but we've quickly cycled through quite a few of our tropical storm and our hurricane names. So now, of course, we're up to Ian. The next named tropical cyclone would be Julia. Typically, in this time of year, the end of September, mid to end of September, we do see a lot of tropical activity. The peak of hurricane season, statistically, is September 10th. So that has come and gone, but there's still a lot of hurricane tropical storm activity that takes place through the month of of September as well as the month of October. So we likely still have quite a few systems to track in the coming days here. The hurricane season does not officially end until the end of November. Your Monday right now, though, before we get to these impacts, does look nearly perfect. On our wazometer, we're giving it at 11. Lots of sunshine today, as well as some warm temperatures. So highs will get up to right around 81 degrees on Monday ahead of Hurricane Ian. We've actually got a stretch of near perfect days through the next few days, with highs climbing up into the 70s for Tuesday and Wednesday. Some chilly mornings, but still a lot of sunshine. Now, as Hurricane Ian comes through, this will also have impacts not only, of course, on our rainfall potential, on our storm threat, but also our temperatures. With more cloud cover and more rain in the forecast, our highs may not even get up to 70 degrees by Friday, as we have some of that widespread rainfall. So if you're thinking ahead to your weekend, I would say at this point, Friday and Saturday, consider them washouts just in case. If the track of Hurricane Ian does end up swaying a little further eastward and we see less rainfall, we may see some improvements as far as that forecast is concerned. But at this point, Friday and Saturday look not only wet, but also relatively mild, kind of cool throughout much of the day. So here's your 7-day outlook. We do have the rainfall potential that comes in into Friday and Saturday associated with that, with high temperatures only getting up to 68 degrees. So I am going to cycle back now to anyone just joining us to go over again the tropical track of Hurricane Ian right now and what we're seeing as far as development from this. This is still a Category 1 hurricane. Right now it's producing those winds up to about 85 miles per hour. Like I mentioned, we do expect Hurricane Ian to intensify into a Category 2 hurricane as it closes in on Cuba throughout the day today. Our official track, that official forecast from the National Hurricane Center, does have landfall as a strong Category 2, borderline Category 3 hurricane, either late tonight and into early tomorrow morning, where we do have those hurricane warnings in effect for the westernmost portion of Cuba. This is then going to be moving up towards the north, and that will allow for further strengthening over the open water of the Gulf of Mexico. I'll show you too some of those temperatures currently in the Gulf of Mexico. I mentioned the water was warm there. We're talking sea surface temperatures, especially right here close to the coast of Florida, that are 86, 87 degrees. Nice for swimming, but definitely conducive to more hurricane strengthening as it closes in there on the coast of Florida. I will get over to and show you some of the wave patterns and the wave strengths that we could see as this gets closer to Florida, where we really expect to see that sea surge is down towards the Gulf of Mexico. And I'll move this camera so that you can really see just how far those impacts will extend. So here's as we get closer to Wednesday and Thursday, the actual landfall of this. And not only is this going to bring surge off towards the coast of Florida, but look at those wave heights. They extend all the way through the Gulf of Mexico. So it's not just Florida, Alabama, Mississippi that will be seeing the perhaps stronger surf associated with Hurricane Ian. It extends all the way west towards Texas and even into Mexico, where we'll likely see some larger waves associated with the strength there of Hurricane Ian into the middle of this week. That's when we'll really start to see some of those impacts. So I will leave you with just one more view of the full track of Hurricane Ian here as it makes its way up towards the north. Hurricane Ian, like I said, will have impacts across the state of Florida no matter where it ends up making landfall. Of course, the strongest winds are going to be within the eye wall of that hurricane, but we will likely see some of that rainfall here in the Atlanta area into Friday and Saturday as well. We'll be fine-tuning this forecast. We'll have tons of updates over the coming days, both on air and online.